What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry, coming at you from one of the more desolate convention center workrooms you'll ever find. Nothing but plain beige walls in all directions. But we are just beyond the hubbub of the combine. Needed to get into a safe space, a quiet space, so that I could talk to you, the people, so that you could hear from Patriots head coach Jerod Mayo. We had the opportunity to meet with Mayo this morning, hit on a variety of different topics over the course of about 7 minutes before he ran off to his morning meetings. A lot of work for staffs, just as a bit of a preface before we launch into the Mayo conversation. A lot of work for staffs, given the new structure of the combine, where the workouts and the interviews all take place in quote unquote prime time. Late night interviews, late night workouts means the day is open, but not for very long, because it is open to be filled with meetings for, if you're somebody like Jerod Mayo or Patriots front office members, agents of your own players, agents who might happen to represent other players that aren't on your team, but might like to be part of your team, given the amount of cap space you have. That might technically be tampering, but that's the sort of thing that happens this week in Indy. You're meeting with potentially outside private entities that have the ability to help your team, consult in some way, shape, or form. A good example that everyone is familiar with now, if you follow the NFL, is Pro Football Focus. Pro Football Focus is an entity that did not always work with all 32 NFL teams. Now it does. But this time of year is the time of year for a place like PFF or something like it to meet with NFL brass for a variety of different clubs, make their pitches, update the clubs on what kinds of content, what kinds of information, what kinds of data that they can offer to teams. And so those are the types of things that teams and decision makers and people in leadership positions like Jerod Mayo, like Elliott Wolf, are dealing with right now. It makes for some long ass days. You might have meetings from 8 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. And then you might be trying to go out and have a few beers with people that you work with or people that you don't see all year because they're in a different part of the country. People that you used to work with might be media people. I don't know. We tend to be out at night as well, but it can make for some tired individuals here in Indianapolis, myself included. So without further ado, if you're watching on YouTube, you don't want to look at my face. You don't want to look at these beige walls anymore. You want to hear from the head coach. I thought he hit on a variety of pretty interesting topics. The last one we will get to, I asked him about Bill Belichick and why it's important for him and Elliott Wolf to make sure that they are differentiating themselves from the previous regime. I think you'll find his answer interesting. That's at the end of the conversation, but he gets into quarterbacks, what he's looking for in these meetings with quarterbacks. Pretty interesting stuff. So this is where I stop rambling. You hear from Mayo and our producer, the great John, the Skull Crusher Henry, cuts me off.
I appreciate you guys coming out. Been here for a couple days now, so excited to really get around the players, to once again collaborate with the scouts and hopefully pick a good player here come draft time.
When it comes to getting to know the players, how well can you actually get to know them? The meetings are relatively brief, but what can you glean from those interactions?
Yeah, sometimes guys walk in, they just have a sense about them. I don't know how to explain it, but swag, I guess. Do the young kids still say swag? But they are short interviews, but at the same time, you can gain information just as far as the confidence level. You'll watch a little bit of film as far as their knowledge of the game. There are a lot of things.
Is there something you're looking for in particular?
Good players. Just looking for good players, Karen.
When you're interviewing them, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're looking for someone who's very knowledgeable of not only the game, but also self-aware of their strengths and weaknesses. I think that's an important part of it.
When you're analyzing or scouting quarterbacks, what traits are the most important to you?
Yeah, the thing about quarterbacks for me, look, everyone wants the big arm, the mobility and things like that, but I do think it's important just to get a good sense of what type of competitor that they are. Their toughness and things like that. Those are things you really want to look for.
How do you measure those things?
It's hard. One thing I would say is the film. So you get on the film and you kind of talk through things. You want to see how they respond to adversity on the field. And honestly, you want to talk about some of the adversity they had off the field as well.
Jerod, you talk about mobility. How much is that factored into the position? I mean, even starting from your playing days and how that might, how much importance has that changed?
Yeah, when you talk about mobility, I think you have to put it in two buckets. There's one where it's pocket awareness, where guys can slide around in the pocket and still run a 5.2 40. And I think there's another type of mobility where, you have the quicker guys that can really get outside the pocket. So, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
We talked yesterday with Elliot about chain of command and in terms of who's making the call at number 3. What have those conversations been like with you and him?
They've been great. They've been great. We're on the same page as far as everything's concerned, and I would say as we get closer to the draft, we'll definitely be one at that point. But at the end of the day, like Elliot's going to make the final decision on that.
Do you guys have a timeline yet for when you want to know what you want to do with number 3?
It's my first time. My first time doing this, so I'll tell you a little bit later. I'm not sure.
What do you remember about your combine experience?
It was hectic. You go see medical, you go see all these teams, and it's just like a whirlwind. It's tough, but at the same time, the guys are up for it. I would say you gain more information from this side and also from the prospect side during the 30 visits, so those are very important.
That wasn't too long ago that you were at the combine. Does that make it easier to relate to these guys?
Oh, absolutely, and I try to let those guys know, look, just relax, breathe, like you'll be okay. It's just the process, but it'll be over soon.
Elliot said yesterday that you guys want to weaponize the offense. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, it just looks like, putting people on the offensive side of the ball that the defensive side has to prepare for, whether that's double teaming or anything like that, but that's what he means by that.
You also talked about a more explosive, faster defense. Is that something you felt last year going through? We could be a little bit more fast.
Every year you're always looking for bigger, faster, stronger players, so, that's a pretty general comment.
Jerod, he said yesterday that you guys want to play younger players, maybe a little bit different. I'm assuming that's something that you guys have talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say you want to play younger players because first of all, they're cheaper. And then second of all, I would say you want to have a good mix, though. You can't have all, 22, 23-year-olds out there. You need that 30-year-old that can kind of settle everyone down that has that experience, too.
We talked to Elliot.
In free agency in a couple of weeks. What is going to be the priority for you guys in free agency?
It's hard to build a sustainable team through free agency, but you do want those pieces that you can kind of plug in. Look, one thing I would say about free agents, you got to make sure they're a good culture fit or culture add as well. So that's definitely important for us.
Do you feel as though this needs to be sort of a slow burn kind of build for you guys? Because of what you just mentioned with free agency, we were talking to Elliot yesterday about the pack away. Green Bay not necessarily known for big splashes in free agency.
Honestly, once again, if you want to sustain success, I don't want to call it a slow burn because we will be competitive. We will put a good team out there. Will we win a championship? I don't know, and I don't want to make those promises, but at the same time, I feel confident about our plan to really turn this ship around. Look, honestly, the way I think about this stuff, it's been done a certain way at a high level for 20 years. But I would also say there's more than one way to skin a cat. It worked for Coach. We'll see what works for Elliot and myself.
Jerod, in terms of cap space, how do you see things moving forward with J.C. Jackson?
Those discussions are still going. Look, I love J.C., coached him, saw him develop into a man. We'll see how that goes going forward. But look, heck of a football player, 2 years removed from injury. He's probably going to move a lot better this year, so we'll see.
Jerod, yesterday Elliot called Kyle Duggar and Mike Onwenu cornerstone players for you guys.
Absolutely.
What's your pitch for them to stick around?
Man, look, I love those guys. I love Big Mike. I think he has the versatility to play guard or tackle. Look, one of those guys that when he's going, he's dominant. And with Duggar, I would say last year going into the season, there were some questions about, can he communicate and all those. He squashed all of that this year. He did a fantastic job in his new role, without having Devin there. So you definitely want those pieces to stay. And going back to what I talked about earlier, you develop through the draft. So if those guys stay, obviously they've been raised here and they can help push the culture forward.
How much have you connected with them, if at all, over the last?
Yeah, they've been in the facility. It hasn't really been about football. It's really just been about how you're doing, and those guys are excited to go through the process, which I think it is important for those guys to go through the process. But hopefully at the end of the day, they come back to New England.
If it comes down to it, how would you feel about using the franchise tag on one of those guys?
That's always an option. But at the same time, with guys like that, you want those guys to be happy. You want them to be here for the long term. So that's the plan.
Jerod, is there any benefit to making it clear that you guys are going to do things a little bit different way than Bill did them? Last few times we talked to you or Elliot, there's been a clear sort of delineation there. Is that important for you guys, or to send a message maybe to even players that might play for you eventually?
Look, it's going to be different, but at the same time, I would say look, Bill did a great job for a long period of time. I don't want you guys to take this as because we're changing as shots toward the previous regime. And saying that we will do it differently and it'll feel different. But at the end of the day, we would like to replicate the success that the prior regime has had. And so I learned a lot from Bill and also his staff. But now we'll see what this chapter looks like in the franchise.
Have you connected with him at all since you took the job?
That's more of a personal question. Like once again, I would say that I've learned a lot from Bill on the field and also in the classroom and how to be a professional. So I'll keep that. You ask him that question.
Couple of takeaways for me from that interaction with Mayo. Number one, he can glean some things from these, albeit brief, back and forths that players have with teams. And I might have said in our conversation that it's 15-minute interviews, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes is the allotment now. Nowadays at the combine, you get to sit with these guys, ask them whatever you want, go over some film with them. It's not an insignificant amount of time. It's not speed dating, quote unquote. Of course, you don't want it to be your only interaction with a player, but when you add up, whether it's Senior Bowl, Shrine Game, and Combine, and Pro Day, and potentially a visit to New England, to Foxborough as one of the 30 team visits that the team is allowed to use, by the end of that process, you can have a relatively complete, a much more complete picture as to how this player, whether it's a quarterback or anybody else, interacts with other human beings. And so for quarterbacks, you want someone who can hold the attention of a room, someone who has some presence, someone who has some confidence. And that's the kind of thing Jerod Mayo is going to be looking for. They've already met with Jaden Daniels. They will meet with Caleb Williams, Drake May by the time the week is ended. Bo Nix, a variety of quarterbacks, variety of players from a variety of different positions. But quarterback in particular, these meetings mean something. And to that end, I will share with you a couple of nuggets that I've heard as it relates to the quarterback position here in Indy. Number one, Caleb Williams is not everyone's number one quarterback, which surprises me a little bit. It's not even something that you hear from evaluators that he is the most far and away, most talented, no questions asked, and it's just the off the field stuff that we have concerns with. No, there are football reasons as to why Caleb Williams might not be every scout, every coach's favorite quarterback in this year's draft class. I found that interesting. Number two, the Bears, after having spoken to someone in Chicago, are not dead set on taking Caleb Williams. It's not a guarantee. It is not locked in. And this week will matter for him for all the reasons we just mentioned. Who are you as a person? We can see what you did on the field. We can see how talented you are. We can see even how you handle adversity in game situations. But how do you interact with other human beings? It's such a key part of the job. This will be a big week for Caleb Williams. Convince the Bears that you're worthy of that number one overall pick by how you interact with them in meetings. That's a piece of the puzzle, like it or not. And so you could say it might be looking too far into it. And there's a reason why guys like Sean McVay and his staff and others don't even come to the combine, because they don't want their judgment necessarily clouded by some of these interactions. But it does matter for a lot of people, the Bears included. So that's not locked in. Big week for him. And if he doesn't have a great week, what does that mean for him? What does that mean for the draft? Does Drake May end up going number one overall? Jaden Daniels? Does Caleb Williams somehow fall to 3? And then do the Patriots have a really difficult decision on their hands to make potentially? Or maybe in their eyes, they would say it's not difficult at all because he is that talented. So I found that fascinating. I can also tell you there's still a lot of love for Justin Fields in the building for Chicago. Now, is there so much that they would pass on taking a quarterback at 1 overall? I still doubt it. But a lot of love for him in terms of the type of person he is, the toughness that he's exhibited, the work ethic that he's exhibited over the first 3 years of his career. Is he the kind of quarterback where 2-minute drill, you're down 6 and you need to drive 80 yards to win, that you feel all that confident in, that he's going to be able to get the job done? Not necessarily. He just ain't that kind of passer. But on 3rd and 8, because of what he can do with his legs, he is able to, as one coach told me, he's able to make some plays that not a lot of humans on this planet can make, because he is that athletic, because he is that strong. He is that fast. He is a physical specimen. You combine that with the kind of football character that he has, and he's going to provide a lot of value, I think, wherever he ends up next. And if the Patriots aren't in love with all 3 quarterbacks in this year's draft at the top of the draft, in my opinion, they should consider trading their 3rd round pick for Justin Fields. Their 2nd? No. Their 1st? Of course not. But I think the 3rd round might be the sweet spot for him, especially a high 3rd round pick, which is what the Patriots have, of course. Last bit on the quarterbacks before we talk a little bit about Mayo and Belichick. Former NFL general manager told me, listen, all 3 of these guys at the top, Williams, May, Daniels, all different flavors, all different strengths and weaknesses. And they all have their weaknesses. And if you get scared off by them, he would get it. That's how he described it to me. But this former GM says they also all have a chance to be stars. And you don't often have that opportunity with the 3rd overall pick. And so at least for him, he's expecting the Patriots to take a quarterback at 3 overall. We'll have plenty more nuggets for you as the week goes on here. I did just want to mention that last couple answers from Jerod Mayo on Bill Belichick. Very clearly to me, I think damage control is too strong, but I think it's obvious that he wanted to push back on the narrative that either he knows is out there or the team knows is out there, that Bill Belichick is being slandered by the current regime in their insistence that they will be different from the Belichick regime. That to me is almost a necessity. You have to separate yourself from Bill Belichick. And it's not slander. It's not a snipe. It is not a quote unquote shot. I understand people seeing it that way. But I think this is a necessary message to the rest of the league, players, agents, that this is going to be a new program, as Elliot Wolf put it earlier this week, that they are going to do things differently, as Jerod Mayo made very clear in his introductory press conference, as he made clear when he introduced his new coordinators, as he made clear again today. That's important because the Patriots have had a perception problem for years now. And I think it's in some ways related to the NFLPA survey. If you go find that thing, they ranked 29th out of 32 teams. And the head coach, though he was graded as a B-, that's not bad. He ranked 27th out of 32 coaches. And he was among the last in the league when it came to efficient use of player time, and among the last in the league when it came to his willingness to listen to players and their wants and desires. And you could say, generation, Z and millennials, and they need too much. It is what it is, as Bill Belichick would say. This is what you're dealing with in today's game. And so they need to change. They need to make it clear to prospective free agents and their representatives that if you come to New England, it's not going to be the same grind you down to a pulp kind of culture. And so that to me is what's at the foundation of Mayo, Wolf, and others making it very clear that they're going to do things differently. All right, that's it for this edition of the Next Pats podcast. Quick one for you. Today, we're going to have another for you a little bit later this week. Some more intel from the Combine, some really good interviews from some of the best national voices when it comes to the draft and what to expect. Keep it locked here on Next Pats. We'll talk to you next time.